In this video, I'd like to talk a little more about how this bit of code gets translated into an actual program that prints out "Hello World." So if you look at the way we ran it before, I don't remember how I ran it before. It might have been out of here, but you can also go up to the Run menu, and you see you have these choices. Run project and build project. These are the ones I want to talk about for right now. So what build project does, if I click on build project here, it says the project source files are compiled automatically when you save them. You do not need to build the project. If you need to rebuild the project's jar file, and we'll talk about that in a second, use clean and build to disable the automatic compiling feature and activate the build. So we'll just do a clean and build. What the heck? And then I'll explain to you a little bit about what that is doing. Okay. So let's look at the files right now. So these are the files in the NetBeans project. So what happens is when you create that NetBeans project, there's a folder somewhere on your system. Since we created one called Hello World App, a folder gets created called Hello World App. And it has these different files in it, and the ones we're going to be concerned with in this video are the source files in the SRC folder and the class files in the build folder. So the SRC folder has whatever files you created, the .java files, and those are just plain old text files. So the Hello World that you edited inside of NetBeans or Eclipse, whatever you used, that's something that you can actually open in let's find it in in any kind of a text editor. So this is Notepad++. You could open this if you're on a Mac in TextEdit or whatever. So you can see it's just a plain old text file. Okay, so what happens with that file is it gets translated. Let me get a picture up here. And there could be any number of Java files. Okay, so you could compile more than one Java file at a time. But when you say build or clean and build or whatever, the Java compiler translates those .java files into .class files. And the class files can also be stored in a jar file. A jar file is basically like a zip file that contains all the classes. But what this means is we're taking this code that's written. So in general, the way computer languages work is we try to find a language that humans can learn and that computers can learn. Okay, so there's a lot of English type words that you'll see, that you'll recognize, and there's certain rules of punctuation and everything that humans can learn, and but it's also structured in such a way that we can translate it into a language for computers. And translating it into a language for computers is the job of the compiler. So the compiler makes all these class files. And actually, we're not all the way done. With Java, we're not all the way done once we make a compiler. What we need to do is use those class files, which can be run locally or over a network. We use those class files together with something called the Java Virtual Machine. And the Java Virtual Machine is the idea behind the Java Virtual Machine is that it plays the role of a computer, but it's a layer of software basically that sits on top of your computer's software. So your computer has certain ways of recognizing mouse clicks and recognizing and writing things to the console and things like that. That's particular to your computer. If it's a Windows computer, it does it one way. If it's a Mac, it does it another way. If it's a Linux machine, and so on, right? So, but what the Java Virtual Machine does is there's a different Java Virtual Machine built for Windows, or built for the Mac, or built for Linux systems, or built for different kinds of systems, so that when you compile your Java code down to these classes, the Java virtual machine, whatever machine it's on, it will read these classes and perform the right actions depending on what machine it was written for, what machine you're using it on, right? So that's the idea behind Java. Sometimes you'll hear write once, run anywhere. That's the philosophy. It'll work more or less well depending on what you're writing and what you're trying to do. But for our purposes, I think you'll find that it'll transfer pretty well to other machines. You'll also see down here it says Java APIs class files. So the way to think about how Java works is it sees your system as a whole bunch of different objects. Like there's a string object, there's a system object. We saw the out is an object. There's an out object, and that's part of the system class. And objects know how to do different kinds of objects know how to do different kinds of things. So an out object knows how to do a print things to the world. Okay, so there are all these different objects, and the way that objects get created, if you think of objects as the cookies, and you need a cookie cutter, right? And the cookie cutter is the class, the different classes. Okay, so not to be confused with this. Well, yeah, I guess This the dot class is like the compiled version of the class. So when you actually run things on the Java virtual machine, these classes are used to create different objects that have different behaviors. Okay, so there are a whole bunch of different classes that are already written for you, and those are called the Java API class files. Okay, so there's actually a class called object, and there's a string class, and there's a system class, and the system class has an out object that knows how to do things. There's an in object too, and I think we talked about this before, the way that classes. So what that means is that somewhere somebody has written code equivalent to like public class system, right? And these things are not necessarily written in plain old Java, but that's not the point. The idea is that you can have classes that are already written for you. So you can have a system class that's already written for you, and you can reuse it. So that's a huge win for programmers, right? To have all this pre-written code that kind of lives out there as objects that you can call on to write your programs. So so when we say, well, let me do it again over here. So when we go in here and say build project, I'll just say clean and build. I think that'll make life easier. And we do this, and we build the jar file. And you can see right here, it tells you where it put it. It put it in the Hello World app distribution folder. So, if you were going to distribute your file, so here's the jar file, okay, and all your class files are in the build folder under classes. Okay, so we created a class called Hello World App.class. So this can actually be run. Let me show you. So I'm going to open up a Cygwin window, and you don't have to do this. I just want to show you that in the background what's going on. So we can actually go to this classes folder, and I'm going to get to it. I'm going to change my directory to this. So I'm changing my directory here to the classes folder, and if I'm just going to, you don't need to learn this stuff, but I just want to show you. So here in this folder, this ls just says to list out what's in this folder. In this folder, I have hello world app.class. I can actually execute this right from here. I can say Java hello world app, and it'll run that .class file that has been compiled and say hello world. So you can see it right here. It says hello world. Okay, so so that's what the class file is, and that class file could be moved to a Macintosh or to a Unix machine or whatever, and you could run it. Okay, so that's kind of cool. So that's some of the basics about how it works. The compiler, you start with the Java files, you create these class files, and then the class files that you wrote are combined with these Java API class files that the Java virtual machine uses to make the stuff actually work.